It's going to be a live test for the live stream from the studio tonight. We have John Barbour coming in. And are we going live, Nate?
It sounds really good.
Oh, okay. John, come on over here then.
Okay.
Something's going on? All right. We've got a live stream working. John, we are going to live stream the event tonight, the Q&A and introduction of your great film. We're showing your film tonight here in a live audience at the studio, and then we're going to take a Q&A with you. Tell us a little bit about the show tonight coming up.
Well, the film starts at 5 o'clock.
6.
Oh, the film starts at 6?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, people come in at 5. Sorry, yeah. I'm so wrapped up in this. The film starts at 6 o'clock. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's the fastest 2 hours and 10 minutes you'll ever see. It's broken down in 10 different chapters with headlines in the Dallas Morning News telling you this is a Warren Commission, this is a House Select Committee on Assassination. It's an unbelievably effective film, and William Matson-Law said it is by far the most definitive film about JFK. That's followed, for me, by the thrill of having people in the audience here live asking questions, because often that's the most exciting part of it. I mean, I've seen the film 100 times, and it has the same emotional impact on me, but I get a true, actual thrill. It's like scoring a goal, on Price, okay? For Toronto, I'm Matthews, and I'm scoring a goal on Price. That's what it's like when you have the Q&A.
Okay, great. Well, this is just a test run to see if anybody's tuned in and watching and can get the live feed. So we'll let this go or cycle for people to tune in, but it's going to be on the Black Op Radio YouTube stream. Obviously, if you're getting this, you're getting the feed. So check back in, and there will be announcements when your Q&A is live. And in the meantime, you can always go to Amazon or Vimeo and buy the film, $2.99, $3.99, something like that.
I made it $1.99 on Amazon so that everybody could afford to see it. But the disappointing thing is I get word from countries in Europe and Asia and Australia and Canada that they can't get it on Amazon, so I put it up on Vimeo for just $3.99, which was the least expensive. I can put it on Vimeo, and I'm getting just a ton of hits from Canada for the film.
Good. All right. Well, tune in tonight. Glad to have you here. Thanks for coming, John.
Listen, I'm thrilled, Len.
Okay, good. All right.
So what my mother and father did on the rumble seat in the car or on the pool table or in the bedroom to conceive me. But don't ever tell me my mother's not a virgin. And he laughed and he said, God, can I quote you? And I said, yes. So I guess he did for years. And then when I finally got around to writing my autobiography, I thought, that's the title. And so that's the title of it. Mother's not a virgin. I mean, because everybody will pick up that cover and look at, what's he talking about? So anyway,
we're going live now.
Oh, no, we're not going live. When is the film going to start?
Well, the film will start in, say, 5-10 minutes.
That's fine. Okay, so you're going to give a couple of people a chance to show up or whatever.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Wondering. But I'm just saying, thanks for being here.
Oh,
we're
for
here
crying out loud. They know thank you as always.
You don't have on the web.
Huh?
For all the people watching on the web.
We're not on the web yet.
Yes, we are. I just was here to tell you. We're live.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So hello and welcome, John.
Oh, thank you so much, Len. I'm glad we're live on the web.
Okay.
Now, what else do you want me to say?
You can just give me a brief description of the movie, what we're going to see.
Oh, when I started to make this film, I called a half a dozen producers, famous directors in Hollywood, and I said to them, what is the most important movie ever made in America? And if I asked you as an audience, what is the most important movie ever made in America? Okay, one or two of you tell me what the most important... Go ahead.
Team America.
What? What is that? Never heard of it.
Oh, it should be required viewing.
Okay. Name a movie that was the most important movie in America. Now, these very famous... What? Say that again?
A Wonderful Life.
A Wonderful Life. A brilliant movie. Not the most important movie. All of these famous directors and producers said, John, it was Citizen Kane, or it was Gone with the Wind, or it was a Frank Capra movie, or it was Godfather. Now, to tell you how brilliant The Godfather is, it is so beautifully crafted. And by the way, guess who was offered the first person to be offered the part of Don Corleone, The Godfather? Laurence Olivier. He turned it down. It ended up with Marlon Brando, who had to take a screen test, and he put Kleenex in his mouth so he could do that. And everybody only got $35,000. And Robert Evans, the head of production at Paramount, does not get the credit he deserves for this film because everybody wanted Al Pacino fired. Al Pacino is the only sympathetic character in the movie, but it's so brilliantly crafted, you're rooting for murderers and killers. That's how good that film is. But it's not an important movie. It is a movie that affects and changes society. It was something that books used to do in the United States. Like, I think it was The Jungle, Sinclair's, Lewis's book about the meatpacking industry in Chicago. Books used to affect people in the United States. Nothing affects people in the United States anymore. We've all been dumbed down. We are all political zombies. The most important movie ever made in America was JFK by Oliver Stone because it had an influence on the society. And the major influence on the society was the fact that it forced Congress. Not that Congress wanted the truth out about the murder of John Kennedy. They've been trying to suppress it for years because half of the members of Congress are CIA assets anyway. Half of the members of the media are CIA assets anyway, from Project Mockingbird, which you will see verified in the film. It was the furor caused by Oliver Stone's movie. So Congress passes the Assassinations Records Act. We are now, thankfully to Donald Trump, he has allowed partially the release of some of these files, which will be the last hurrah for John Kennedy. But the most important movie was that. Now I hate to say it as a former film critic, and I hate to say it as the writer and the director and producer of this film, the most important movie ever made in the United States of America is the movie that you are about to see. It's called The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I've made it available for $2 on Amazon because it's my gift to America. When I ran away as a troubled, law-breaking teenager when I was 16, came to the United States, and I was deported when I was 17, carried out in chains. I was deported 10 years later because I snuck back into the country again. I never thought I'd get into the United States. Thankfully, I did, and I got to have a great career, a great life, and a great family. And when I was researching the law libraries after I'd been deported, I found that the one thing that would make a renegade like me and a valuable citizen if I could make a contribution to society. Well, how does a 16-year-old lawbreaker make a contribution? You just can't. So in any event, I finished making this film. I made it available for $2. It is my thank you to the United States of America for giving me my life and my family and my career. And after 50 years, I came here to Vancouver and met my sister after 50 years, after deleting her from my life because I came from a severely dysfunctional family long before it was popular. But in any event, the gift is to America that no longer exists. And we're going to do a Q&A after this, and for me, the most wonderful part of it, I've seen the movie 100 times. I am affected by it every time that I see it because I know the United States of America will never allow another Jim Garrison to become a law enforcement officer. He was the only law enforcement officer in America to actually investigate the case when the case was not being investigated by the United States government. John F. Kennedy was the only peace president in 100 years in the United States. They will never allow a man like that to take office again, and they will never allow a man like Martin Luther King, especially a black man, to have that much influence. He spoke at Riverside University in New York City 1 year before they blew his head off, and he said, "I hate to say that, but the largest terrorist organization in the world is my government and my Pentagon." And a year later, they blew his head off. And they blew his head off not because he was organizing the garbage collectors in Memphis. He had realized that the war was fake. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was fake. And he organized a 1 million man Poor People's March on Washington because he wanted the wealth in America to be shared fairly. And that's why they murdered Martin Luther King. You're about to see a movie about two of the most amazing men you will never see in life again. That's President John F. Kennedy and Jim Garrison. John Kennedy, in 1963, had a dinner at the White House. He used to invite a lot of intellectuals. He had opera singers. He had writers. But at this dinner were Nobel Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, Peabody winners, 12 of the greatest artists in America. And his toast to them was, "Never has there been so much brain power in this room since Thomas Jefferson dined alone. You will never find a Donald Trump that intelligent or that smart or a George Bush or any president that intellectual, that human." And in June the 10th, 1963, John Kennedy gave the greatest speech about peace he has ever given. And I'm happy to announce that on June 15th at American University, where John Kennedy gave that speech, which was America's Sermon on the Mount, we are going to be screening our film for the students. And the wonderful thing about this is I look around the room, there were only 2 of us here alive when John Kennedy was murdered, and that's my sister and myself. All of you were a lot younger, but you know something. You weren't alive.
I was born in 61.
You were 2 years old?
Yes, sir.
Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming here. I thank you all for coming here. And now, I didn't mean to talk that long about the introduction to the film. Okay. There you go. You can push the button and start the movie.
Are you ready, Nate?
Yeah.
Stay tuned for the Q&A afterwards. That'll be really exciting.
Okay, sure.
In February of 1962, President John F. Kennedy said, "We seek a free flow of information. A nation that is afraid to let the people judge the truth or falsehood in an open market is a nation afraid of its people." On November 29, 1802, Thomas Jefferson, the principal drafter of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, said, "The only security of all of us is in a free press." Mark Twain, America's greatest writer and early anti-imperialist, said, "There are laws to protect the freedom of the press's speech, but none to protect the people from the press," and later added, "If you don't read the newspapers, you're uninformed. If you do, you're misinformed."
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
As 1963 came on, and the agency is more and more lustful about getting into Southeast Asia, it finds itself with a president who has made a decision to withdraw the troops we had. Vietnam represents more in raw materials than any spot available to us in the world. They had to get into Southeast Asia, and only one thing was blocking them, and that was a man with reddish brown hair, about 5 feet 11, and that's all. And for a major intelligence agency, that's like removing a fly from the table.
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Put me on, Phil. Put me on. The motorcade is coming by here. The presidential car coming up now. We know it's the presidential car. You can see Mrs. Kennedy's pink suit. There's a Secret Service man, spread eagle, over the top of the car. We understand Governor and Mrs. Connolly are in the car with President and Mrs. Kennedy. We can't see who has been hit, if anybody's been hit, but apparently something is wrong here. Something is terribly wrong.
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. President Kennedy shot today just as his motorcade left downtown Dallas. He was wounded in an automobile driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas, along with Governor Connolly of Texas. They've been taken to Parkland Hospital there, where their condition is as yet unknown.
The assassination would not have been attempted without assurance that certain members of the Dallas police force were going to cooperate.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
John Kennedy was killed by a major force. The simplest way to describe it is a Central Intelligence Agency.
I had the impression, both before and after the assassination, that Jim Garrison was an absolute nut.
I certainly wouldn't say with confidence that we would make arrests and have convictions afterwards if I did not know that we had solved the assassination of President Kennedy beyond any shadow of a doubt.
Trial of Clay Shaw by the district attorney's office was the feeling in the district attorney's office that the case would never get to trial anyway.
Garrison had reason to be fearful for his case and his life, unbeknownst to him and the public until the recent release of this CIA 1967 memo. The agency was convinced Garrison would get a conviction of Clay Shaw if they did not intervene immediately.
The words ended up in print. They were twisted in an indescribable fashion. That's one of the reasons I didn't give interviews. Now, why did I make an exception in this particular case? I made an exception in this case because you impressed me as an unusually honest person who is genuinely interested in what happened to John Kennedy. I think it's fair to describe the assassination as essentially a no-risk operation. Without knowing precisely who they were, I think there had to be assurance that there would be, at least at the outset, a few elements of the media that would be cooperative from the beginning, because they had to start off with a certain momentum from the beginning before reality started to interfere with the building of the illusion.
Thank you all very, very much, ladies and gentlemen. I've seen it numerous times, and I'm moved enormously, first of all, by John Kennedy's loss and by the loss of Jim Garrison. But what this film does, it proves two things absolutely. That Jim Garrison solved the murder of John Kennedy in 1967 when he arrested Clay Shaw for conspiracy to kill the president on behalf of a conspiracy crafted by the Central Intelligence Agency. The other thing that the film proves, and most of the federal government and nearly all of the American media are complicit in obstructing justice. Nature is extremely, extremely simple. If you look at everything in nature, the laws of nature, they're all very simple. This film does what no book about the assassination has ever done, It is done what no film about the assassination has ever done. It shows you how simple it is to solve this crime and point out to Americans why we became such a dysfunctional, bloodthirsty society opposed to peace. In the United States military, there are 247 medals that you get for going to war, but there's only one peace prize. That's the American society today. The end of this film shows you what is obvious. I remember when they were trying to remove Richard Nixon after the Watergate Hotel break-in, and they were all talking about the fact, well, the emperor wears no clothes. But the truth is, if the emperor wears no clothes, you have to go the logical, truthful one step further and arrest them for indecent exposure. This is an open case with the Justice Department. It is so obvious that Dan Rather lied to the American people when he said that third shot sent his head forward. So therefore, he is obstructing justice. We put together a 10 most wanted poster because when I interviewed Jim Garrison September 5th, 1980, he handed me a whole list of people who were alive then. He named the shooter of Officer Tippit, who was a government witness for the prosecution. He said, but I can't make it public, otherwise they'll sue me. And you can see from the film, I had proof that George Slaughter on tape deliberately libeled Jim Garrison. He could have sued NBC for millions and Slaughter for millions, but he didn't want to. He said, I want to see my family. I want to do my job, and he passed on it. I mean, it was heartbreaking. I've only cried 3 times in my entire life, and that was, I literally was sobbing on the phone when I called to him. And I was so moved because he said to me, by the way, aside from sending us Real People T-shirts, I'll give you the name of the fake Oswald that's in prison back east. You give him a Real People T-shirt, and he'll probably tell you the story of what his job was as one of the Oswalds. So what you have, very simply, is I am not surprised that the mainstream media, only one of them bothered to review the film, and that was the LA Times, and they called it conspiracy porn. And then all they could do was denigrate me, and they called me an angry curmudgeon. Well, you can see why I'm angry, because if you look at the film, and nothing has been done with the very, very obvious facts. So the first fact is, the most disappointing thing for me, and I hear this from Joan Mellon. Joan Mellon is the best biographer of Jim Garrison. Has written brilliant books about Jim Garrison. She called me the other day and she said, John, I'm giving up on the assassination community because there are a bunch of egos who are so involved in their own stuff, they can't get behind the truth that Jim Garrison solved the case. And your big problem is you're the only one to whom he has told the story, and it's your job to take it out there, and they're mashing you for it. So in that respect, I am indeed a curmudgeon. But the pain for me is that some of these so-called assassination community. When you say the word community, it's like they work together. They don't work together. They work for themselves on their books, on their films, or whatever it is. And most of them, you would think, would be running to the theater or to Amazon or Vimeo. John Barbour is saying he's got the definitive film. It's part 2 of the Garrison tapes. My God, I must rush to see it. They rush to avoid it. Because for $2, Americans can learn the truth, and they don't have to go and buy somebody's book for $25 for crying out loud. So all they would have to do is put down their little projects, watch this film, and realize that November 22nd, they should all join forces and march on the Justice Department and make November 22nd America's Bastille Day. It is that absolutely simple, but they won't do it. The other way to solve the problem may be even simpler. As you saw in the film in 1963 when John Kennedy was killed, a corporation or an individual could only own 5 television or 5 radio stations. At that time, there were 1,500 different owners, therefore different opinions. The worst president in the history of the United States, Bill Clinton, signed the Communications Act, putting 95% of all our media in the hands of 6 corporations, which you can see have all been propagandists for perpetual fake wars. It's all been admitted that the Gulf of Tonkin resolution starting the Vietnam War was fake. The same thing with weapons of mass destruction. But you know what? I have told many people, do not watch this movie. As Jack Nicholson once said, you can't handle the truth. Well, many Americans don't want to know the truth anymore because they can't handle it emotionally or intellectually because they know they can do nothing about it. Millions of Americans marched when it was reported there were no weapons of mass destruction, but George Bush hadn't started his shock and awe. They marched in every major city in America, and what happened? The war went on. Mark Twain was right 100 years ago when he said, if voting makes a difference, they wouldn't let us do it. It is true. It's like I own some General Motors stock, so I get to vote every once in a while on the board at General Motors. But I don't get to say, hey, how many miles will the carburetor get, or what is the car? I have nothing to say about the design of the car, even though I own the stock. That's what it's like to be a voter in America today. We have been turned into inactive political zombies because they know nothing can be done. The easiest way to resolve that would be to reverse Bill Clinton's Communications Act and not allow any corporation to own more than 7 or 8 stations. When I started in 1970 on the AM show, they could only own 7 stations. So when I had Governor Reagan on my show, a Republican, I had to put a Democrat on the show because they could get 5% of the vote. I don't know if Democrats could get 5% of the vote. I had to put a Nazi on. I had to put a socialist on because they could get 5% of the vote. That is all gone. I have screened this. I screened this for the number 1 anchor of the news station in Reno, Nevada. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. And twice during the screening, she gasped. And I asked her why she gasped afterwards because that wasn't the headshot. Why were you gasping? She said, John, I'm a news anchor. I majored in journalism. I never knew there was such a thing as a fairness doctrine. I never knew there was such a thing as an equal time clause. I am learning things I did not know. That's why I made it available for $2 because everybody should see this film unless they feel they cannot handle the truth. And it's very, very exhausting. But we are here for a Q&A, and I would be anxious to hear what any of you have to say, any question you might have for me, and I would be happy to answer it. So who would like? Yes, sir.
Well, I think that you've pointed out very clearly that the media has been usurped by, say, CIA or say, government interests. Would you suggest that same thing has occurred in social media? Like when we're, getting our information now, not from the major networks, but from Twitter, so we're getting our information from Facebook.
The question about, because in the film they see that Project Mockingbird was designed by the CIA, as Jim Garrison says, to infiltrate the media to create perpetual fake wars. Now we have these fake wars on terrorism. Las Vegas was not a terrorist act, which I live. Everybody in the media is saying it's a terrorist act. London was not a terrorist act. Orlando was not a terrorist act. San Bernardino was not a terrorist act. We don't know what it was because they'd never investigate them. They've shut down the investigation in Las Vegas. You have 17 witnesses who are shot, who are saying there's a second shooter on the ground. Everything is shut down. They have not done forensics on the bullets taken from some of the victims. Did they match Paddock's gun? And in Las Vegas, you must all know that they have more security cameras than they do chips. So if they got camera footage of Paddock going up there with the guns, where is it? So I'm not a conspiracy theorist. A conspiracy theorist is really a lie detector. I am just like an old-fashioned journalist just asking these obvious questions. And this gentleman asked, is social media also infiltrated? Absolutely. These people are brilliant. They don't own the country for nothing. I mean, and they must have weaponry that we can't even imagine. I mean, I saw this guy, what's a Japanese fella who is the scientist they always trot out on national...
David Suzuki?
No, that's a Canadian. I'm talking about the American guy, Ayakaku or something like that. He said they have 3 billion watt laser weapons. Do you know what kind of damage that stuff could do? They have things that we haven't the foggiest idea about. You saw in the church committee in the 70s, as shown in the film, that they had heart attack guns. They could shoot you in the heart, and they could kill you, and they'd never find out it was a gun or whatever it was. I mean, these people are just absolutely and totally ingenious in what it is they're doing. And I am just a simple storyteller. And this is by far the most American, simplest, most important story you could ever hear. And you want to know something? This is the last hurrah for John F. Kennedy and seeking justice for him. Because as I said before you looked at the film, they will never allow another Jim Garrison. They will never allow another John F. Kennedy. They will never allow a Martin Luther King. Anyway, I didn't want to get up here and make another speech. So yes, sir.
Well, in what he said about the social media and that, there's a great quote. It goes, "A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." So what we've got today is too much information. It's hard to sift through. It's like going through mountains of garbage.
Oh, okay. Repeat that again for me, because we don't have a microphone on you. But say it out a little louder so that I can get about a wealth of
information creates a poverty of attention.
A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. That is so brilliant, because it's true, you know. I've often wanted, thinking about America today, I'm sort of known as the godfather of reality television for creating real people. And a year before I got it on the air, I predicted I would do that. And I predict that this film that you just saw will be around a lot longer than any book ever written about the assassination or any movie, fiction or otherwise, except for Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment. Because Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment points out discrepancies in the Warren Report that would hold up in a court of law. And the only place where facts are discovered are in a court of law. But they will never allow Jim Garrison into law, and that's why you will see that in Las Vegas, where there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits, they will never get into court. They will be settled beforehand, because if you get into court, you need discovery, and they do not want discovery about what may or may not have happened in Las Vegas. So that I have always thought, you know, I should write a book called Entertained to Death. And that's just what's happening in American media today. I mean, when I was in the business, there were 3 networks. Now there are 500. It's more straws in the same septic tank. So, another, yes, sir, another one.
Another quote to that is, freedom of the press is only guaranteed to those that own the press.
Oh, that is so true. He said that freedom of the press is only guaranteed to those that own the press. I have to tell you this very brief story. When I was the media critic at NBC in Los Angeles, I never had a contract. And the reason I never had a contract, they would own my material. I didn't want anybody to own my material. And I was thrown out of the building. I was fired 3 times. And one of the times I was fired, I was telling Len Osanek, and I want to thank Len. Len Osanek, please give Len a hand. Len Osanek is by far the best researcher involved in the assassination of John Kennedy that anybody I know, and that includes really great researchers like James D. Eugenio and a handful of others. Nobody is as good as Len Osanek. And Len and 1 or 2 others are helping keep this film. This film is a runaway hit on Amazon, and nobody knows about it. But anyway, I was telling Len this story. There was a book, came out in the mid-'70s, written by Mark Lane and Dick Gregory called Codename Zorro. Codename Zorro. Zorro was the J. Edgar Hoover's code name for Martin Luther King. And he had described Martin Luther King as the most dangerous man in America. They tried to get Martin Luther King to commit suicide. You all know the story. They sent these letters. We're going to release footage of you with the women, and you got so many days to kill yourself. Well, Martin didn't kill himself, right? So what happened is they had to decide to get rid of him. And there's a wonderful book, again, you should go to Len's site to learn about this and listen to the interviews with William Pepper. And the book is called The Plot to Kill the King. And Dick Gregory spoke a lot about this. Dick Gregory was with an agency called the Kepler Agency and would get $10,000, $20,000 to go speak around the country. And he would show footage of the Lorraine Motel. It was the FBI who made Martin Luther King move from the first hotel he was staying at into the Lorraine Motel. And they stuck him on the first floor. I mean, he booked on the first floor. But that's not where he was shot. He was shot upstairs in the balcony. And Dick Gregory talks about the fact that Jesse Jackson and another reverend were working with the FBI to help set up the assassination of Martin Luther King. It was Jesse Jackson that got him moved up to the balcony. Now, there is footage on the internet where you can see Dick Gregory telling this story. Jesse Jackson has yet to sue him. Not sued him because they don't want to get into a court. But back to this story about the media. The book called Codename Zorro, about everything that was discovered by the House Select Committee on the assassination of Martin Luther King. And it was brilliantly written, as Mark is a wonderful writer, and Dick Gregory co-authored it, so I wanted to review it. My news director, Erwin Shavchik, was his name. And the one thing I like about my work and admire about my work is that I name names. My news director said, no, you're not going to put these conspiracy theorists on the air. And I said, hold it, this is your government you're talking about. The government, and he said, no, they're the ones that saying that there were 4 shots. I said, we're not talking about John Kennedy. We're not talking about that. We know they overruled the Warren Commission. We're talking about Martin Luther King. He said, you're not getting on the air. He fired me that day. I called my lawyer, George Bain, immediately, and I said, I want to sue NBC. He said, why? I said, violation of my First Amendment rights. He started to laugh, and he said, you don't have any. I said, what do you mean I don't have any? He said, well, you're an employee. He said, you want to have First Amendment rights, you start your own network or start your own newspaper. And strangely enough, they had made the mistake of advertising or promoting the fact I was going to review this book about the assassination. And people started to call the station, where's John? Where's John? They called me in. I got to do the review. Sold a lot of books. And the next day I went into Mr. Safchek's office and I said, Erwin, is the American government still here? He said, what are you talking about? Well, listen, I did my review about the book and I don't hear the American government collapsing. So he threw me out of the office again. But that's how it is. There is, you know, you can have freedom of speech in America as long as you don't have an audience. Another question?
We got one from online. We have a question from somebody online.
Oh, thank you.
And his name is Robert Truitt, and he asks, John, have the now adult Garrison children seen your film? And if so, what are their thoughts?
Oh, what a great question. The question was, and it's from Robert Truitt, have the Garrison children seen your film and their reaction to it? I must report that when I did the first Garrison tapes, Mr. Garrison was on his deathbed. Elizabeth, the daughter, was the liaison to me about the film. And she called me one day and she said, have you ever heard of anybody named Rose? And I said, no, why would I know the name Rose? And, well, doesn't this Rose work for Oliver Stone? And I said, I don't know who works for Oliver Stone. And she said, we just got a call from this woman, identified herself as Rose. And she said that it wouldn't be a good idea for Mr. Garrison to make this documentary with John Barbour because John Barbour has this horrible reputation for being a troublemaker. And I said, oh, my gosh, well, I don't know. What did your father say? And my father said, screw them, help John. He's the only one who ever wanted to put me on television. So the children, everyone helped me with this. Now, the sad thing is, and I have to thank Oliver Stone for making the brilliant movie JFK. It's an absolute work of art. Without that, my two films would not exist. However, as happens in Hollywood, the Garrison family had to sue Oliver Stone and Warner Brothers for not getting their share of the profits. Because the most creative people in Hollywood are the accountants. They're not the directors and they're not the writers. And that's what killed Jimmy Garner. Jimmy Garner in the Rockford Files. It's made billions for Universal. And he wasn't getting his share. He sued Universal. And Universal proved in the court that they hadn't made any money. And that broke Jimmy's heart, one of the sweetest men I know. And anyway, back to the Garrison children. They are no longer interested in their father. Stephen Jaffe, who was, as you saw in the film, he was the photo analyst for Jim Garrison. Also, Stephen Jaffe was the only one who could secure the perfect copy of the Zapruder film from the French government for Jim Garrison, because when Garrison sued and beat Time Life magazine, they sent him a piece of crap that you couldn't even put on the screen. And so Steve Jaffe went to France and got a pristine copy of the Zapruder film, and that's what you see now, thanks to Stephen Jaffe. And Steve has a relationship with Eberhard Garrison, who is a lawyer. 3 times I have sent an email to Eberson, and I've offered to send him a copy of the film, and he has not responded. So I don't know. But Stephen Jaffe tells me that Eberson is the only one who still supports his father. I mean, the pain that must come down on the children over what happened first to their father, and they lose their mother because she divorces. And it's like a curse on them, when the truth is it should be a blessing. And by the way, when the Garrison family sued Oliver Stone and Warner Brothers, it was settled out of court. And Oliver has said he can't stand the Garrison family. And I am surprised by Oliver's disinterest in this film, even though he supported the first film, because Len Osanic, he's on Len's show all the time, and Len played an important part in this film. And the opening credits, the opening title that you saw, Len did for nothing because he loved the idea of this show. So the movie is out there. It's doing great on Amazon. And so that's my thank you note. My thank you to the United States of America that no longer exists for allowing me to be in this country and doing my work, the thing that I love, creating a terrific family. And it's gone. Now I have to go on to something else because I'm not wed to this. I just wanted to tell a story. It's like Mark Lane said, I just wanted to tell a story. So, do you have any more questions? Another one, yes.
Please. I really appreciate everything you've done up till now and your stick-to-itiveness. That's awesome. And I've known Len for quite a while, what, 25 years or 20 years? And if it hadn't been for Len, I wouldn't have known about any of this stuff, about the whole background, the details of it. I always heard, and I'll tell you the problem is fear, complacency, ignorance, and you've introduced in there a new element which I never thought about before, greed.
Well, yeah.
It keeps the truth from coming out.
Well, this gentleman is paying an enormous, well-deserved a compliment to Lena Senek for the work that he has done. But I must tell you something. My conclusions about people are that people are not reasoning creatures. They do not reason. They are emotional creatures. I mean, for those of you who, let's say, believe in God, okay, there's one God. There are 2,375 organized religions praying to one God. Why isn't there one religion? If we were all reasoning creatures, we'd all be atheists, or we'd all be Catholics, or we'd all be Jews, we'd all be Muslims. We all have access to all the facts and knowledge throughout history. Why are we so different? We intellectually, we reach maturity much later than emotionally. We're raised emotionally. Everything is emotional with people. So I have no faith in that respect. And I would describe humans as larger amoebas. Amoeba is the smallest life form on the planet. And all biologists describe it as pleasure-seeking and pain-avoiding. Human beings are made up of billions of these cells. We are only pleasure-seeking and pain-avoiding. But for me, pleasure-seeking is telling a great story or listening to a great story. And pain-avoiding is staying away from negative people. And I must tell you, I am so grateful that you have taken your Sunday off and come here to spend this time with Len and me and his staff. I just deeply, deeply appreciate it. And I can't tell you how thankful I am for the thousands of strangers who contact me and support my work on this film. But it's out there now. It's going to have a life of its own, and it'll be around for a long, long time because it's a piece of history. And when I was talking to Mr. Garrison, one of the last things he said to me, I said, Mr. Garrison, you were an FBI agent. You were in the military. He was at Dachau when Dachau was freed from German occupation, and he took a picture of himself sitting on the edge with the camps behind him. It's the only picture that he had in his office, and written underneath was "Lest we forget." I mean, that was back in 1945, and look, he was just a young man at the time, but he had a 5,000-year-old soul. And I said, how, with this background, you're not politically aligned, whatever made you think you could take on the federal government? And he said, John, I guess as a kid, I just saw one too many Frank Capra movies. And it's true. It's like me when I was a kid living in the theater. It was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It was Jimmy Stewart. But I must tell you, one of the greatest comments I ever heard came from one of the dirtiest comics I ever heard, and this is my last word in the whole thing, and that was Red Fox. Red Fox once said, heroes ain't born, they're cornered. Jim Garrison was cornered by the truth, and I was cornered by meeting this magnificent man, Jim Garrison, and fortunate enough to live in a time when we had a president like John F. Kennedy. And as Ed Murray used to say, good night and good luck. Another question? Okay. As Ed Murray used to, what did you say? No more. Okay. I repeat. As Ed Murray used to say, good night, good luck. Bye-bye.
And that's the way it is.
That's right. That's the way it is. So. Anyway.
Well, thank you.